కనిపించమయ్యే కాలం ఇదే ఎందుకంటే బాటేగా మనలన్నీ పెట్టేగా పగలే కొడిగాగా చక్ 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 ఆయుధమిదే అహమిక బఢే దివిటీ ఇదే చెడుగు కుచితే నిరుపేదల ఆకలికే కనుమగిస్తూ పరితగించి అది సహాల దహాల గృహాల గృహాలు కారణముల సుడిగాలి మనం కాలికి తొడుగులు ఎందుకులే తిరగబడే యువ శక్తి మనం ఆయుధమెందుకు విసిరేస్తే గుడితో నడు భేదం విడు ఇప్పుడు మనకుల చొరబడినది కనే పరువిడి శ్రమిస్తూ శ్రమ ఫలిస్తూ అది విధాన విధుల్లోని వీర సైన్యాలు నిలిస్తే సజ్జనులంతా గుదిగుంటే నక్కలు రాజాలేతుంటే ఎదురే తిరుగులు యువ జనత ఎదురే తిరుగులు భూమాత
Good evening, friends and comrades. Welcome to the second day discussion of Weekend with Vedika. We were discussing yesterday on how Professor Prabhat Patnaik is trying to make us forget Lenin. I am Dr. Suresh, a professor in public health dentistry. I am moderating today's session on behalf of Vedika moderators team. And we listen to a foot tapping number from Yuva, a multilingual movie directed by Maniratnam. The music was composed by A.R. Rahman. It's an energetic song. And we played it in Telugu. Then a few instructions before we go into the topic. This is an audio meeting. We cannot see any video. To listen to the talk clearly, please connect to a good broadband internet and connect to your device with earphones. The moderator's team is moderating the talk. If there is any technical glitch, we will address it immediately. If there is any problem from your end, try to check your earphones and your device volume and internet connection. If still the problem persists, you can try to disconnect and reconnect to the voice channel. If you still have any problem, please bring it to our notice by texting in questions information text channel here. And we are streaming this talk in YouTube and Facebook, the links for which are shared here in the questions information text channel. If any of your friends have any difficulty in joining Discord, please share the links to them so that they can follow the discussion on YouTube or Facebook. Uh, we invite questions at the end of the talk. So please hold your questions till we invite them. You can write down your questions straight and clear. You can post them in Discord questions information text channel. And those friends who are following the discussion on YouTube and Facebook can post the questions in the respective comments box. So coming to the topic, uh, uh, so yesterday, Comrade Bipin was telling uh, why is it important to talk about Professor Prabhat Patnaik, and he also made it very clear to us that he was talking about Prabhat Patnaik uh, as an embodiment of a class position, not as Prabhat Patnaik as a person. Uh, and how Professor Prabhat Patnaik tries to convince us that Leninist conjuncture is superfluous now, as there is no imminence of proletarian revolution. But Bipin Balaram showed how the crux of Leninism is the actuality, but not the imminence of revolution. And Bipin took up two aspects of Professor Prabhat Patnaik, many propositions. One is bourgeois parliamentary formal equality, and another one, the question of nationalism. So how Professor Prabhat Patnaik took petty bourgeois position on these two aspects, and what is the actual revolutionary Marxist position on these two. And today, Comrade Bipin is going to specifically talk about uh, Professor Patnaik's new book, a 2016 book on imperialism, theory and imperialism. And in this work, how did he misrepresent the Lenin's theory of imperialism? So we are going to listen from Comrade Bipin. Bipin Balaram is a Marxist political analyst. He is actively associated with Marx Circle, a Marxist study circle which is now running in many branches in Kerala. He holds a PhD in mechanical engineering, and presently he is serving as a research faculty at Łódź University of Technology, Łódź, Poland. While doing his engineering, he was an active uh, member in Students Federation of India. He currently runs a blog, Revolutionary Spring, the link for which was shared yesterday, and we'll share it again today at the end of the talk, where we can find links to his writings. He wrote both in, he writes both in English and Malayalam. He writes extensively. And there we can also find links to many of his talks, again in English and Malayalam. His critique on Professor Prabhat Patnaik's theory of imperialism, on which he is going to talk today specifically, can also be found in his blog, and it was also published in Marxist Theoretical Journal, Anvil. So with this introduction, Comrade Bipin, I welcome you, and I'm handing it over to you.
Thank you, Comrade Suresh. I'm happy to meet you all again today. And we shall continue from where we left off yesterday. Yesterday, we saw Professor Patnaik's claim that Leninism is irrelevant now. And the reason that he gave for this claim was that the revolution is not imminent. We also saw some representative political prescriptions of Professor Patnaik, which he gives to the Indian left in the post-Leninist era. We exposed the non-Marxist and non-dialectical nature of these prescriptions and these ideas yesterday. But Professor Patnaik's idea of making us forget Lenin as Comrade Suresh was speaking, does not stop there. Because another great legacy of Lenin, another great theoretical contribution of Lenin to the theory of Marxism, especially the theory of Marxism in 20th century, is, as we know, his theory of imperialism. Now, Professor Patnaik aims his guns on the Leninist theory of imperialism. He tries to show us how many of the aspects of theory of imperialism do not hold now. Leninist theory of imperialism do not hold now. Patnaik does not attack Leninist theory of imperialism in its entirety, probably because he is afraid to do so. But he attacks all its predictions, and he tries to tell us why many of the practical aspects of Lenin's theory of imperialism is invalid in 21st century. After that, this he does in many articles over the last decade or so. But after that, once theory of imperialism by Lenin is not completely valid, then we don't have a fully valid theory of imperialism, right? And it is the bounden duty of an intellectual like Prabhat Patnaik to come up with one for us to use. So he duly obliges, and in collaboration with his colleague and partner, Professor Utsa Patnaik, who is also a professor at JNU, they come up with a new theory of imperialism, Patnaik's theory of imperialism. And the book, as Comrade Suresh was telling us, was published in 2016-17 with a commentary by David Harvey. Today, we will see Prabhat Patnaik's ideas on imperialism and in particular, his new theory of imperialism. But to do that, I think that I need to talk about at least some important aspects of Lenin's theory of imperialism, because all of us may not be fully proficient with Lenin's theory. I will not be able to go into Lenin's theory of imperialism in any exhaustive detail at this point of time. That is impossible in a talk like this. But what I'll try to do is I'll try to touch upon certain important aspects of Lenin's theory of imperialism. The first point that I want to make is there are many misunderstandings and lots of misconceptions about the idea of imperialism. And these misconceptions and misunderstandings are very prominent in left circles. And these are very dangerous. For example, almost always in left circles, and especially in reformist left circles like the social democratic parties, imperialism is thought of as a policy of certain countries. For example, when we call the United States of America as imperialist, what social democratic left usually thinks about is that it is a country that follows a policy of imperialism, a policy of conquest, direct or indirect conquest, a policy of subjugation of other countries by force or by other means. So it is usually thought of as a policy followed by certain countries, for example, the United States or Germany or Japan, etc., etc. But if imperialism is a policy followed by certain developed capitalist countries, then it emerges from this idea that imperialism will go away if these countries change their policy. For example, a very benevolent president comes in the United States, and then he or she says, enough with this conquest, I am stopping it. Then imperialism just goes away. Now we know that's not the case. Many naive people on the left believed that Obama is going to be such a president, was going to be such a president. But we know that imperialist conquests were more strongly conducted when Obama was the president. So it is wrong to maintain, to think about imperialism as just a policy of certain countries. Yes, there is a policy aspect to imperialism. We will come to that a little later. It also involves a policy of certain countries, but fundamentally, basically, imperialism cannot be, and imperialism is not a policy of one country or the other. Then what is imperialism? I will start with Lenin's definition of imperialism itself. Lenin says in his book, Imperialism, the Highest Stage of Capitalism, he says, if it were necessary to give the briefest possible definition of imperialism, we should have to say that imperialism is the monopoly stage of capitalism. So Lenin's definition leaves no doubt at all. Imperialism is not a policy of a particular country or a group of countries. It is a stage of capitalism. It is the monopoly stage of capitalism. And as the subtitle of Lenin's book tells us, it is the highest stage of capitalism. Conceptually, not temporally, but conceptually, the highest stage of capitalism. So this is something that we have to always keep in mind. When we say imperialism, it is nothing but a stage of capitalism. The content of the definition of imperialism is political economical in nature. It is not a policy issue. It is as a stage of capitalism. Now we have to understand what are the essential features of capitalism. And Lenin talks about different features of capitalism in his book. So I'll try to take you through it rather quickly. So Lenin says in his book that, and I am quoting Lenin here, imperialism emerged as the development and direct continuation of the fundamental attributes of capitalism in general. So what Lenin means is that imperialism was not imported from heaven. Imperialism was not something which is different from capitalism. Imperialism emerges from inside capitalism. It is the development of capitalism that leads to imperialism, because imperialism is a stage of capitalism. And it is the development and continuation of fundamental attributes of capitalism in general that leads to imperialism. One of the fundamental attributes of capitalism is competition. Is competition between different capitalists, is competition between different capitals. So it is this competition which is a fundamental attribute of capitalism, which develops. And in capitalism, what happens, as we know, is that small capitals are eliminated. Many small capitals, many small enterprises just go bust. They go out of market. They go out of competition. So what happens to the remaining capital and what happens to the remaining production facilities, that they continue to grow. And this leads to what Lenin calls and what Marx also calls the concentration of production and concentration of capital. That is, capital and production begins to be concentrated in fewer and fewer and fewer bourgeois hands. And this concentration of production and this concentration of capital leads to monopolies. So we can see the dialectical idea of negation working here. Competition is negated by something which is by some development, direct continuation inside the process itself, and it leads to monopolies. So it's a very dialectical process, the formation of monopolies. And because there is concentration of production and concentration of capital, monopolization happens in production and in banking, because concentration of capital leads to monopolies in banking. So this is the first essential feature of imperialism. And the next feature is that once monopolies have been created in production and in banking, there happens a merging of bank capital and industrial capital to form what Hilferding called finance capital, and that is the name that Lenin also uses. So Lenin, I quote here, Lenin defines finance capital like this, and I'm quoting from Lenin now. Finance capital is the bank capital of a few big monopolistic banks, merged with the capital of the monopolistic combines of manufacturers. So what is finance capital? Finance capital is the monopoly capital with the banks merged with the monopoly capital of the manufacturers, of the industry, of production. That is what finance capital is. And we have to be very careful. We have to distinguish carefully between finance capital and financial capital. In modern economics, there is a term called financial capital, which modern Marxist political economy also uses. Financial capital is very different from finance capital. Financial capital usually characterizes capital which are used for financial uses. And finance capital is very different from that. Sometimes even big economists confuse these things. So finance capital is formed by the merging of bank capital, monopoly bank capital, and monopoly industrial capital. That leads to the formation of finance capital. But this creates a problem for advanced capitalist countries, because now that there is huge concentration of capital, and now that there is monopoly, and the finance capital has been formed by coalescence of bank capital and industrial capital, there is suddenly a superabundance of capital in advanced capitalist countries. And this leads a superabundance of capital in advanced capitalist countries, which is in search of profitable investment opportunities. And profitable investment opportunities for this much huge amounts of capital cannot be found in the parent country itself. So the capital would have to be exported mainly to backward capitalist countries. And this is the third aspect of Leninist theory of imperialism. Concentration, which leads to monopolization. Monopolization, which leads to the formation of finance capital. Finance capital leading to the formation, leading to the superabundance of capital, and which leads to the export of capital typically to backward capitalist countries. Why to backward capitalist countries? Because the rate of profit is usually higher in backward capitalist countries rather than in core capitalist countries, because of many political economic reasons, which I don't want to go to right now. So more capital, more profit, more rate of profit is available from backward capitalist countries. So export of capital is usually to backward capitalist countries, which does not mean that capital is not exported to capitalist countries also. That is also there. So Lenin says that pre-imperialist colonialism, as we say, imperialism is a stage of capitalism. Right? So when capitalism was not imperialist, that when capitalism was not at its monopoly stage, then such type of capitalism was characterized mainly by export of commodities, export and import of commodities from capitalist countries to backward countries, export of manufactured commodities and import of raw materials. But distinguished from this, in imperialist capitalism, we see that this is not fully replaced. I mean, there is still export of commodities and import of raw materials, but the main export is not in commodities, but in capital. So now that imperialism is characterized by export of large amount of capital to many parts of the world, these capitalist countries, these imperialist countries, the bourgeoisie, the corporate bourgeoisie in the imperialist countries look for control on backward countries, because they are putting huge amount of capital in these backward countries. Backward in the sense, backward with respect to capitalism. So it is obvious that they would want to control these countries to make sure that their capital, the investment is safe. And imperialism usually follows two ideas for this. One is the formation of international capitalist monopolies and the sharing of the whole world market between these capitalist monopolies. Because, for example, if a German monopoly is producing oil or producing steel, let us say, and then US monopoly is also producing steel, they would reach an agreement, an international agreement of how to share the market between them. This is possible because there are only a few players now. There are, like in free market capitalism, there are no 1,000 capitals all producing steel, all competing with each other. That is not the case. There are only a few capitals now, monopoly capitals. So they can easily come to an international agreement and share the market among themselves. This happens all the time between international capitalist monopolies. And this protects monopoly capital from international competition. But that is not just enough. What they want is control of backward capitalist countries. And this leads to the stepping in of the state belonging to imperialist countries and to control these backward countries. Lenin calls this the territorial division of the world among great capitalist powers. And these control of backward capitalist countries by these great capitalist powers need not always take the form of colonies. They can also take the form of colonies. They can also take the form of direct control. We have seen direct control in US control in the Middle East, US control in Afghanistan, etc., etc. But increasingly, in 21st century, they may not take the form of direct control as colonies. They may take the form of control in terms of semi-colonies, control in terms of dependencies, control in terms of spheres of influence, etc., etc. But the idea here is that the imperialist countries in the sense that the countries in which monopoly capitalism is housed, and the state of the imperialist countries have an objective need to control backward capitalist countries. And this leads to the territorial division of the world among great capitalist powers. Of course, if there is such a division, which Lenin says is completed in 1914, 1917, with any change in relative power of these capitalist countries, this territorial division will have to be done again. Because if one imperialist country loses a little bit of power, and if some other country comes up with military power, in military power, or in productive capacity, or in prestige, etc., then it would want more territorial division to be in its name. So this usually leads to incessant inter-imperialist conquests, inter-imperialist rivalry among imperialist powers. So the practical conquest, practical thing that happens out of all these facets of imperialism is that it leads to inter-imperialist rivalry between imperialist powers. And obviously, such rivalry leads to war. They may lead to direct war, as happened in First World War. It was an inter-imperialist war between two groups of imperialist powers, or it may also be that it can lead to proxy wars. A war in which two warring parties are just proxy of imperialist powers. This can also happen. This has also happened many times. But the basic idea is it leads to conflicts. It leads to inter-imperialist conflicts, and because of this, to war. So this is the gist of Leninist theory of imperialism. The main economic aspect of theory of imperialism as put forward by Lenin. Now, Prabhat Patnaik contends that many aspects of Lenin's theory that we just saw are no longer valid now. In many articles that he wrote in the last 10 to 15 years, Prabhat Patnaik says that inter-imperialist rivalries are no longer there. He says that the present age is characterized by a muting of inter-imperialist rivalries. So according to Prabhat Patnaik, what we see now is a situation in which inter-imperialist rivalries between major imperialist powers have been muted. There is no such thing. And what is the reason for this? Patnaik says that the reason for this is that the finance capital has become international or globalized. What we have now, according to Prabhat Patnaik, is not just finance capital, but globalized international finance capital. So he says that such globalized finance capital, international finance capital, sees partitioning the world, as Lenin was saying, territorial division of the world, as standing in the way of its freedom to move globally. So what Prabhat Patnaik says is that internationalization of finance capital has muted inter-imperialist rivalries because this international finance capital wants to move freely anywhere in the world and thus does not want the world to be partitioned, does not want the division, redivision, territorial division and redivision of the world. And from this, Patnaik concludes, and here I am quoting Patnaik, that the era of struggles for repartitioning the world among rival nation-based monopoly combines was over, since such combines no longer held center stage. In short, the Leninist conjuncture had been superseded. Wars, of course, continued, but they did not express inter-imperialist rivalry, not even by proxy. It's a very strong statement by Prabhat Patnaik. He says that the era of imperialist rivalries are over. And because of this, the Leninist conjuncture has been superseded. Wars, of course, will continue here and there, small wars here and there, but they have nothing to do with inter-imperialist rivalry. They are not even proxy wars between imperialist powers. So this is a direct attack on Lenin's theory of imperialism. But what is the reality? What is the reality with respect to this muting of inter-imperialist conflict that Prabhat Patnaik wants us to believe? See, the phrase globalized finance capital, international finance capital, is ambiguous because it's not very clear whether by internationalized finance capital, globalized finance capital, Prabhat Patnaik is referring to the operation of finance capital or the affiliation of the finance capital. If Professor Patnaik is talking about the operation of finance capital, if he is saying that the finance capital, the operation of finance capital has become international in its scope, that is not a new thing at all. That is true. That is true. Nobody contests that. That is true. But in fact, it was 100 years ago. Finance capital, when you export finance capital, it becomes international, becomes globalized. So that's not a new thing at all. And if he is referring to the affiliation of finance capital, if he is referring to the fact that finance capital is no longer moved to a particular country, to a particular nation, it has become international in its affiliation. And because of this, it doesn't have connection to its originating state. And because the new international finance capital has no connection to the state from which it originated, it does not want repartitioning of the world because it wants to travel globally. If that is what he says, then he is patently false. Because it is true that finance capital has become globalized, but globalization of finance capital is only in its operation. In its affiliation, finance capital is still very much connected to the originating state. For example, let us take the monopoly in America. Let's take anything. Walmart, for example. Walmart is being pushed all throughout the world by the American state. Walmart is helped throughout the world by the American state. For example, when Hillary Clinton was the vice president, she lobbied very strongly for the introduction of Walmart into Indian domestic market. Why? Because the connection between Walmart, which is part of monopoly capital in the US, and the American state is very strong. And that is true for almost all finance capitals. So just because the operation of finance capital has become globalized doesn't mean that the affiliation has been globalized. Affiliation is still to a particular state. It's not that Walmart likes US state. No, it's just that Walmart comes from the US and then what is state? Whose state is it? State, as Marx said, is the managing committee of the bourgeois class, isn't it? And the bourgeois class in almost all imperialist countries is thoroughly monopolistic bourgeois now. So whose state is it? It is their state. And they'll take care. I mean, the state will take care of them. It is their state. So the internationalization of the operation increases the need for state support also, because protection for global interests are needed. Power of the state is needed to force others to respect this particular capital and to force entry into markets, into open up markets for them, etc., etc. So Prabhat Patnaik's idea that the globalization of finance capital has muted inter-imperialist rivalry is patently false. And hence, inter-imperialist rivalries have gone nowhere. It is still with us. But what's the practical reality? If we look around right now, do we see inter-imperialist rivalry or not? Because at last, the theory has to be tested in practice. So what is happening around the world now? So we have to have a historical perspective in this. Post 1990, after the fall of the Soviet Union, a particular international conjuncture was created in which the US had hegemony. The US imperialism had global hegemony. And many historians, many political economists, just by seeing this particular conjuncture, particular situation which was created by the sudden disappearance of the opposing power, by seeing this US hegemony, they concluded that it is going to be a unipolar world from now on. And it is in this context that many left political economists, many reformist left political economists all across the world started attacking Lenin's theory of imperialism, saying that imperialism has outgrown the need for conflict. I mean, such a theory is not a new thing, because if you go 100 years ago, Karl Kautsky, in fact, theorized something called ultra-imperialism. An imperialism in which all finance capitalists from all countries come together to create what is called ultra-imperialism, in which there will be no need for conflict. So this is not a new thing. This has at least a history of 100 years. But in this particular conjuncture post 1990, when US hegemony was something which could be seen directly, many came to the wrong conclusion based on just this particular situation, that inter-imperialist rivalries are things of the past. But that was not true. See, other imperialist powers like Germany, France, Japan, etc., many powers, it was not that they did not have any contradiction with the US imperialism. They had myriad contradictions with US imperialism. But they were not in a position to attack US imperialism because of the hegemony that US had. So it gave us the appearance of a united imperialist bloc. But inside this united imperialist bloc, which was created, which was made into NATO after a particular time, there were many contradictions between major imperialist powers. But in 20 years, 25 years, US gradually lost the upper hand due to dwindling economic and military power. And the China and Russia imperialist axis slowly emerged as a big competitor to NATO, which is still under the US hegemony. So right now what we see is the formation of a rival imperialist power, a rival imperialist axis in China and Russia axis. For example, countries like India jump here and there depending on what they feel, depending on the issue. But we see the formation of two different imperialist axes now in NATO and China-Russia axis. And this is clear on the ground also, because the US hegemony, the NATO hegemony, was given a big reminder that its hegemonic imperialism is over in the war in Syria in 2016-17. War in Syria was a proxy war with different powers supporting different fighting dispensations. And the victory of Assad in Syria in 2016-17 and the withdrawal of US troops, I think Trump was the president that time, 2017-18, victory of Assad and the withdrawal of US troops gave the initiative in Syria back to the Russia-China axis, especially to Russia. And this was the first major setback to the US imperialist hegemony after 1990. And this clearly tells us that again, slowly but steadily, inter-imperialist rivalries have started emerging again. And then another important shot in the arm for the rival imperialist axis came in Afghanistan with the comeback of Taliban and the withdrawal of US troops. I think it was in 2019-20. And you can see Afghanistan now, there is huge investments which China have made in Afghanistan for reconstruction of Afghanistan, so-called reconstruction of Afghanistan. And it has been reported in Afghan and international media that Chinese restaurants have sprung up in Kabul. What does that mean? It means that many Chinese businessmen are going to Kabul and visiting Afghanistan on a very periodic basis. That is why there are Chinese restaurants in Kabul now. So what happens? I mean, the China-Russia axis, and in terms of Russia, many exchange deals have been signed between Afghanistan and Russia in oil, gas, wheat, etc. So this is also the rival imperialist power, China-Russia axis, pushing the US out of a particular territory and establishing their hegemony there. And these conflicts between these imperialist axes at last have brought us to the war in Ukraine. And the war in Ukraine is not even a proxy war. It's a direct war between NATO and Russia. And obviously China is, even though under the table, with Russia. So it's not even a proxy war. It's a direct war between NATO and Russia. It's a direct war between two inter-imperialist axes. Again, war in Palestine is not an inter-imperialist war, but it is a war by Zionist imperialism on Palestine. So it's also an imperialist war. So if you look at the world, and there are many other small proxy wars that I have not mentioned here in the Middle East, etc. So if you look at the international situation now, and look at Prabhat Patnaik's articles, and you read that wars, of course, continued, but they did not express inter-imperialist rivalry, not even by proxy. I mean, you have to feel sorry for Professor Prabhat Patnaik, because reality has completely contradicted Professor Prabhat Patnaik. And it has shown that Lenin is correct. Now, after Professor Prabhat Patnaik tells us that the Leninist theory of imperialism is not fully valid. Now, then, as I told you in the beginning, he goes along with Professor Utsa Patnaik, he frames a theory of imperialism of his own. In his book, which came out in 2016-17, which is entitled A Theory of Imperialism, not Theory of Imperialism, but A Theory of Imperialism, he puts out a theory of imperialism of his own, which is very interesting. Again, I will go through the main aspects of Patnaik's theory of imperialism. First, what I'm going to do is I'll tell you the aspects of Patnaik's theory of imperialism without going into the merits of these aspects, without going into the merits of the arguments that Patnaik's make. And once I have introduced Patnaik's theory of imperialism to you, let us go and look into its merits. And let us also see how it compares with the Leninist theory of imperialism. Now, Prabhat Utsa Patnaik says that theory of imperialism is not a stage of capitalism. In fact, imperialism is not even a new thing. What they say in the beginning chapters of their book is that imperialism has been an aspect of capitalism till the birth of capitalism, since the birth of capitalism. Since the development of capitalism, imperialism has been an aspect of capitalism. They say clearly in their book that Karl Marx was able to understand only one particular structural relationship which characterized capitalism. And this structural relationship that Karl Marx could understand is the relationship between labor and capital. That is what he theorized. But Prabhat and Utsa says that there is another structural relationship which also characterizes capitalism and which is as important as the labor-capital relationship. This relationship is what they call imperialism. Now, let us not be under any illusion here. What Prabhat Patnaik's book on imperialism does is that it completely revises even the foundations of Marxism. It is, I told you that it is named A Theory of Imperialism. And in the preface, I think, of the book, the authors say that, see, this is only one theory of imperialism they want to put forward. And they also say that this is not competing with other theories of imperialism. So they're being very humble and polite here. They are just saying that, we have one more theory of imperialism. We would like to put it here among other theories of imperialism. That's not what they're doing. What they're doing is they're revising not just the Leninist theory of imperialism, but the basics of Marxism itself. Because Marx has said clearly that the most important and the only structural relationship that characterizes capitalism is the labor-capital relationship. Everything in Marxism is based on the study of this relationship, the dialectics of this relationship. But what Prabhat and Utsa says is that that is not true. We have another structural relationship which is as important as this, and it is this structural relationship that we call imperialism. So it is not a stage of capitalism. It has nothing to do with monopoly. It has nothing to do with concentration, nothing to do with finance capital. No. And it has been a part of capitalism for the last 400 years. But poor Marx could not understand that. Now, Prabhat Patnaik and Utsa Patnaik, after 500 years of capitalism, have come to teach us about this new structural relationship characterizing imperialism. What is this structural relationship? This structural relationship is between what they call metropolitan countries and the countries in periphery. They say that there are two groups of countries in the world. One they call metropolitan countries. They also call it core countries, north countries, temperate regions, etc. And what they have in mind is US, UK, continental Europe. These countries, temperate regions. And they also say that opposed to this, there are countries in the periphery. There are countries in the global south, tropical regions. So they say that there are two groups of countries here, temperate regions and tropical regions. Temperate regions are UK, US, continental Europe, etc. And tropical regions are Asia, Africa, Latin America, what we call global south. And this is an opposition based on climatic conditions, geographic conditions. And they say that between these two groups, there is an asymmetry. There is a geographical asymmetry between these two groups. A geographical asymmetry which is connected to climatic conditions. What is the reason for this geographic asymmetry? The reason for this geographic asymmetry, according to Prabhat Patnaik, please understand that I am here only telling you the aspects of Prabhat Patnaik's theory. I am not going into the merits of these arguments. These arguments may strike many of you as, stupid, but that's not my problem. That's the problem of Patnaik. So let me continue. What is the reason for this geographical asymmetry? According to Prabhat and Utsa Patnaik, the reason for this geographical asymmetry between temperate regions and tropical regions is the fact that the temperate regions, the metropolitan countries, US, UK, Europe, etc., need a large range of commodities, agricultural commodities to be exact, which it cannot produce due to geographical constraints. Because these countries in temperate regions are colder countries. And in colder countries, many of the agricultural products which they want, commodities which they want, for example, cane sugar, spices, tea, coffee, cereals, fibers, etc., cannot be produced here. They have to obtain it from the periphery, from Asia or Africa or Latin America. This is the root cause of geographical asymmetry between these two groups of countries. The fact that due to climatic conditions, temperate regions are not able to produce certain commodities which they use on a daily basis, certain agricultural commodities which they use on a daily basis, and they have to obtain it from the periphery. And then, after making this interesting group of countries and geographical asymmetry, they say that these commodities which are produced in peripheral regions, in tropical regions like India or Africa, are always produced by petty producers or peasants. Oh, what is the basis of this? No basis. It's a claim. It's a claim, and we'll come to the merit of the claim a little later. But it's a claim that is made in Patnaik's book, and no data is provided for this claim. It's just a claim. It's a hand-waving claim that we have to take in on face value. That these commodities, agricultural commodities, that advanced countries want are produced in backward countries of global south by peasants or petty producers. And the next idea is that the agricultural land in these countries, in tropical regions where these things are produced, are more or less fully used up. There is no more land in which cultivation can be done in tropical countries. They say in their book that tropical land mass is more or less fully used up. Again, it is contestable, but let us see that a little later. Now, this is the situation. We have temperate countries which wants the commodities from the tropical countries, and in tropical countries, these commodities are made by peasants or petty producers alone. And in those countries, tropical landmass, the agricultural landmass, is almost fully used up. There is no more land which you can use for agriculture than what is being done now. So if this is a situation, then if there is capital accumulation in periphery, in tropical regions, in Asia, in India or Africa, Latin America, then what happens is the peasants and the common man, petty producer, the common man in fact, becomes a little bit more richer, and the demand for these commodities will increase in the tropical regions itself. For example, if India is making tea, and if there is capital accumulation in India, and if the per capita income of India increases, then the demand for tea, for Indian tea, will increase in India itself. So that, Patnaik say, so that when you bring it to metropolitan countries, temperate regions, the supply price of these will increase. So the temperate regions will have to give more price to get these commodities to their lands, if there is more demand for these products in tropical regions itself. That is common sense, logic, okay, that will be. And then if there is an increase in supply price of these commodities, then Prabhat Patnaik and Utsa Patnaik says that this will threaten the value of money in the temperate as well as tropical regions. This is a technical argument, economics technical argument. I'm not going to go into the details of this technical argument here. It is not very important for our discussion here, and it's not very important in the whole structure of Patnaik's theory also. If you are interested, you can, if anybody is interested in this argument, then you can read my article in which this argument is completely discussed, which is available in the blog. Okay. So what they say is that when the supply price of these commodities increases, this threatens the value of money, both in the core as well as in the periphery. This, the metropolitan countries, the temperate countries cannot allow. They cannot allow the value of money to be threatened. So what do? They impose income deflation on the periphery. That is, they make sure that the income of common man in tropical regions are kept as low as possible always. Why is that done? Because if the income is low, then the demand for these commodities in those countries itself will be low, which means that the temperate countries will be able to get it at low price. And the policy of this income deflation is what Prabhat and Utsa Patnaik calls imperialism. So this has nothing to do with capitalism. This has nothing to do with the stage of capitalism. It's all based on climate and geographical asymmetry. And it's also based on many hand-waving arguments and axioms that are introduced, like these commodities are always produced by petty producers, tropical landmass is completely used up, etc. Anyway, one thing is very clear. It has nothing to do with capitalism. It is how metropolitan capitalism react to a geographical asymmetry. And Prabhat and Utsa also says that this has been going on for the last 500 years. We did not just notice it, that's all. Now, it is shocking, in fact, for me at least, that two of the foremost economists in India, in fact, Utsa Patnaik is a very meaningful economist in agrarian relations in India. She has done very good work, not like Prabhat Patnaik. Utsa Patnaik has done very good work in Indian agrarian relations in colonial times and post-colonial times. And it is shocking to see two of the foremost economists in India coming up with such ludicrous argument, saying that imperialism is a policy followed by temperate countries to get tea, coffee, cereals, and fibers at non-increasing prices from tropical regions. So, this is the theory of imperialism put forward by Prabhat and Utsa. And now we can quickly go through the merit of these arguments. I mean, the merit of these arguments in full is given in my long article, and I will not take you through all of them. Obviously, we don't have the time, and there is no need for that, because I will give you, or we will talk about certain inconsistencies, contradictions, and absurdities of this theory, 2 or 3 number maximum, so that you get an idea of how much of it is just, stupid. Now, the first problem with this theory is that even though this theory is based on the geographical asymmetry between temperate and tropical regions, what Prabhat Patnaik or Utsa Patnaik, what they define as temperate region and tropical region is never given in the book. A definition of metropolitan periphery or core and south is never given in the book. Because this is important, because they are introducing a new division of the world based on climatic conditions. Not just on climatic conditions, but the possibility of production of certain agrarian commodities in these countries. So based on this, they should give a clear definition of these 2 different regions, so that I can clearly say, based on this definition, take Russia. Is it a temperate region or a tropical region? Is it core or south or whatever? Based on this definition, based on this division that they have, that is not given. Sometimes they talk about tropics, sometimes they talk about subtropics, sometimes they talk about temperate regions. It's all muddled in there. And this is a point that David Harvey raises in the commentary that he wrote on the book. He says that there is a big problem related to looseness of definitions in this book, which completely undo the book in the beginning itself. But Prabhat and Utsa wrote a note on this criticism from David Harvey, saying that, of course, all the things cannot be defined. Their argument, which is also given in the book, is that, you see, a point can be clearly defined, but an elephant cannot be defined. And tropical countries are like elephants. But we have to understand that we will know an elephant when we see it. In the same way, we can understand a tropical region when we see it. This is, not even amusing. So, quizzed about a definition of tropical and temperate countries, they say that there is no definition. When we see, we will understand what kind of country it is. Very good definition. Very good. That is a beginning problem itself in their argument. And the second problem is their argument or claim that the tropical landmass is fully used up. Obviously, the tropical landmass is not fully used up. Again, David Harvey says in the commentary that there is abundant open land in sub-Saharan Africa, in Amazonia, in tropical rainforests, etc., etc. So why can't the metropolitan countries just cultivate whatever commodities they want in these new land masses? Which means even if the demand for these commodities increase in the tropical countries itself, the price won't go up, because the production is also increasing. Okay? But of course, the book doesn't say anything about it. It is assumed in the book, or it is claimed in the book, that almost all agricultural landmass has been used up. But that is patently false. And because it is false, before the beginning itself, the theory falls. The theory falls down completely. Because if there is more landmass in which cultivation can be done, what is the need for income deflation? There is no need for income deflation, and hence there is no need for imperialism also. Now the next point is, that is very important. Prabhat and Utsa says that these commodities are cultivated in tropical countries only by petty production and peasant agriculture. Now then it emerges that why can't we just increase the productivity, agricultural productivity, rather than having to deflate the income by imperialism, etc., etc. If we just increase the agricultural productivity in India or in Africa or South America, wherever these commodities are being produced, then it will solve the problem, isn't it? We will get more commodity, and even if the demand rises, the price will not rise. But the Patnaik says that that's not possible, because we are living in neoliberalism, and these commodities are being produced only by peasants, and peasants by petty production cannot increase the agriculture productivity much, so they need state support for increasing agriculture productivity. Because the state is neoliberal, such as state support is not forthcoming. So the productivity increase is not possible. But this has a problem. Why only petty production and peasant agriculture? Who is so particular that these commodities should only be cultivated by peasants? Why can't the metropolitan countries or the tropical countries itself introduce capitalism for the cultivation of these commodities? And here, why capitalism is not being introduced in agriculture in tropical countries for these commodities, Prabhat Patnaik and Utsa Patnaik comes up with a real gem of an argument. What they say, and I'm quoting them here, such an introduction of capitalism in agriculture, they say, it would have brought about the results in a far more violent form, in a far more socially and politically unsuitable form. Look at this gem of an argument. What they say is that capitalism, the ruling class of metropolitan countries and of tropical countries, are not letting the introduction of capitalism into agriculture because it would be more violent and more socially and politically unsuitable. We have to clearly bow at the kind-heartedness of capitalism here. Kind-heartedness and benevolence of capitalism and ruling class here. Because they are letting peasant agriculture and petty production continue in these commodities, in these agricultural regions, because they don't want violence. They don't want any social change to happen in a violent manner. Now this is shocking, because as Marx says, and this is a very important, very, very interesting quote by Marx. Marx says that if money comes into the world with a congenital blood strain on one cheek, capital comes dripping from head to toe, from every pore, with blood and dirt. It's a very famous quote from Marx. And I can quote one more very famous quote from Marx again. And this is the quote. Has the bourgeoisie ever done more? Has it ever affected a progress without dragging individuals and people through blood and dirt, through misery and degradation? It has never. Always, everything that the bourgeoisie has done has been through blood and dirt, through misery and degradation for the peasants, for the working class, for the toilers, for the common man. And Prabhat and Utsa suddenly says is that metropolitan bourgeoisie and the tropical bourgeoisie are not introducing agriculture into and not introducing capitalism into agriculture here only because they don't want violence. So this is the level to which the Patnaiks have stooped. Okay, even if we agree with these ludicrous ideas just for the sake of argument, let us say, okay, agriculture productivity cannot be increased because neoliberal state won't give funds to increase it. Capitalism cannot be introduced by the state or by imperialist powers into agriculture because they don't want violence. But still, it is a natural process in capitalism for petty production to be supplemented or to be supplanted by capitalism. And it is a natural process that peasant agriculture will be removed and will be changed to capitalist agriculture. It's a natural process. Nothing has to be done. Nobody has to do anything. And this natural process will be accelerated, will be encouraged in neoliberalism, because under neoliberalism, there is no state support, no subsidy, nothing for peasant agriculture. So peasant agriculture becomes untenable. In capitalism and in neoliberal capitalism, surely so. So obviously, these commodities which are being cultivated at the beginning by peasant agriculture or by petty production will be, after some time, these petty production or peasant agriculture will be replaced by capitalist agriculture. That's a natural process. Development of capitalist relations in agriculture, ABC of Marxism. So we would suppose that such a thing can also happen in tropical countries. If such a thing happens, then without any need for state to be directly involved, the production, the agricultural productivity is going to go up. And if the agricultural productivity goes up, there is no need for income deflation at all. There is no need for imperialism. But about this, Prabhat Patnaik and Utsa Patnaik keeps a very steady silence in their book. Nothing is said about the development of capitalist relations in agriculture in the book at all. That is also very interesting. So these are all contradictions and inconsistencies and absurdities, ludicrousness, incompleteness in their theory. There are many more. But let me give you one more, which is very, very interesting. Now, if we take Prabhat Patnaik's and Utsa Patnaik's theory of imperialism on its face value, then we can make a very, very interesting and important conclusion, which is that tropical capitalism in tropical countries can never be imperialist. Why? Because Patnaik says that imperialism is the policy of income deflation, which is being used against tropical countries by temperate countries because of geographical asymmetry in agricultural production. You look at India. India is a tropical country, and we produce all of these commodities here. There is no need for us to get any of these commodities from Europe or from any other part of the world. So we don't need to be imperialist. We don't need income deflation. So Indian capitalist, for example, or Brazilian capitalist, or African capitalism can never be imperialist. This takes us to yesterday's discussion, in which Prabhat Patnaik, I introduced you to the idea of Prabhat Patnaik of good and bad good and bad nationalisms. He said that European nationalism is always aggrandizing, always bad, and Indian nationalism, Indian anti-colonial nationalism has always been good and will be good. In the same way, here he says, because of the geographical asymmetry, the European, the US, the UK capitalism will always be bad because they cannot cope, they cannot do without imperialism. So all of temperate capitalisms, metropolitan capitalisms are imperialist. But none of tropical capitalism can be imperialist because we already have all these products. So what does that mean? It means that we have two types of capitalism. Now this is the border of absurdity. Because, see, it emerges from his book. He doesn't say that, they don't say that, but if we use their arguments only and only their arguments, and if we let logic work, then it has to be concluded that there will be two capitalisms. One capitalism, which is imperialist in Europe, US, UK, etc., and another capitalism in India, Brazil, China, Japan, etc., which will never be imperialist, which can never be imperialist. This is absurdity at its end. Now the question, we have come to the conclusion of the talk, and I will only try to answer one more question. It is that, why does the Patnaiks come up with such a ludicrous theory of imperialism? What is the raison d'etre? What is the purpose of this theory, which on its face is inconsistent and contradictory? What is the idea behind it? The idea behind this is very simple. We talked yesterday regarding the class roots of Prabhat Patnaik. Class root of Prabhat Patnaik is that he is a social democrat. In politics as well as in economics, he is a card-carrying social democrat. He is a reformist social democratic he has a reformist social democratic political position. Now, this political position, class-wise, class affiliation of social democracy is always with the petty bourgeois. Social democracy is a petty bourgeois class orientation. And because of this petty bourgeois class orientation, Prabhat Patnaik and all social democrats want to preserve petty production in agriculture and as well as in manufacture. The preservation, the protection of petty production is always their mandate, is always their need, because they are petty bourgeois. By class affiliation, they are petty bourgeois. And the Indian left has been for the last 50 years telling the petty bourgeois that inside capitalism they can be protected, which is foolish, which is stupid, absurd, because inside capitalism, petty production, petty bourgeois production is untenable. We know that in manufacture as well as in agriculture. They will be supplanted. Let us see what Lenin has to say about it. And I'm quoting Lenin here. Lenin says, petty production in agriculture is doomed to extinction and to an incredibly crushed and oppressed position under capitalism. There is no salvation for the peasant except by joining in the activities of the proletariat, primarily those of the wage workers. This is the idea about petty production and petty bourgeois production, peasant production in agriculture by the Marxists. We do not see any progressive nature for petty production. And in capitalism, it is doomed to failure. But because Prabhat Patnaik and the Indian left are petty bourgeois in class affiliation, they always try to somehow protect petty bourgeois. Protecting petty bourgeois politically is different from protecting petty bourgeois manufacture or petty bourgeois agriculture. So they want to protect petty production in agriculture, peasant production in agriculture. But they know, as they are acting to be Marxist, they know that this is against Marxism. Under Marxism, this cannot be done. Because saying that petty production can be retained in capitalism is against Marxism. They know that. So, what does Prabhat Patnaik do along with Utsa Patnaik? They concoct a theory of imperialism, and they define imperialism as income deflation on peasantry by advanced countries. Now what happens? Using this theory of imperialism, if the petty bourgeois peasantry is being decimated, what does that mean? They are not decimated by capitalism. They are not decimated by the natural process of decimation of petty production in agriculture, in capitalism. But they are being decimated because of imperialism. Because advanced imperialist countries are imposing this income deflation on peasants. What does that mean? It means that trying to protect peasants, trying to protect peasant agriculture, trying to protect petty bourgeois production in agriculture becomes progressive. Why? Because it is anti-imperialist. Now, with such a theory, what Prabhat and Utsa have done is that, or at least what they hope to do, is that they are trying to make the protection of petty production in agriculture a progressive thing, an anti-imperialist thing. And this gives the social democratic left an argument for the preservation of the petty bourgeois. And in this, Prabhat and Utsa are just discharging his and her duties as social democratic and petty bourgeois intellectuals. So this is the raison d'etre of Prabhat Patnaik's theory on imperialism. This is why, even though it's a ludicrous theory, they have come up with this theory. This is the purpose of theory, to make petty production or the protection of petty production progressive and anti-imperialist. To conclude, we see here the difference between Lenin's theory of imperialism and Patnaik's theory of imperialism. Lenin's theory of imperialism is securely rooted in Marx's theory of capitalism. It comes out of Marx, comes out from Marx's theory of capitalism, from Marxian political economy. Every category that Lenin uses is a dialectical synthesis which comes out of Marxist political economy. He tells us how the development of capitalism directly leads to imperialism. Here, in opposition, we have Patnaik's theory of imperialism, which has nothing to do with Marxist theory at all, which has no connection with Marxist theory. In fact, it tries to revise Marxist theory in its foundations itself by saying that there are two structural characteristics of capitalism, out of which Marx was only able to study one, and one is this geography. And Lenin's theory is rooted in political economy, but Patnaik's theory is rooted in geography. It has no political economic content at all. It's a policy that metropolitan capital has to ward off geographical asymmetry. And most important, the last one, but the most important thing, in Lenin's book, the 10th chapter, the last chapter of Lenin's book on imperialism is titled Place of Imperialism in History. And there, Lenin clearly says that imperialism has come out of development of capitalism. It is a higher stage of capitalism, and imperialism is taking us towards socialism. Imperialism is making all the objective conditions necessary for us to go to the next stage of system of production. That is, Lenin very dialectically shows how the development of imperialism itself is creating all the necessary objective conditions needed for us to transcend capitalism itself. And I'll quote from his book here, Lenin's book here, 10th chapter. He says, economic essence of imperialism is monopoly capitalism. This in itself determines its place in history. For monopoly that grows out of the soil of free competition, and precisely out of free competition, is the transition from capitalist system to a higher socio-economic order. So here, Lenin clearly situates imperialism as the highest stage of capitalism, which takes us dialectically, which is a transitionary stage between the capitalist system and a higher socio-economic order. And in his book, if you read his book, he clearly demarcates the socialization of production, the planning aspect, which is brought into by imperialism, and how, because of these, it acts as a transition stage from capitalism to socialism. But in Prabhat Patnaik's idea of imperialism, nothing like this is there. It is unconnected with capitalism, and it is unconnected with socialism. And Patnaik also talks about transcending capitalism. In one page of his book is around 250 pages. And in one page of the book, he talks about transcending capitalism. And there, he does not situate, and he cannot situate this imperialism as a stage of capitalism, or he cannot theorize about its connection to a different socio-economic order. All that he can do is, and all that he does in that page, is to say that imperialism brings about oppression of peasants. And because of this oppression, revolution can break out anytime, anywhere. This is what he says in the book. I'm not making this up. You should look at the book. Okay? What he says is that imperialism, due to this income deflation on the periphery, is bringing oppression of the peasants and petty producers. And because of this oppression, revolution can break out anytime, anywhere. So we see that the only thing that Prabhat Patnaik and Utsa Patnaik has after the whole theory of imperialism is hope. Just hope. It is the same as what we had yesterday regarding the imminence of revolution. It is just hoped that we will see revolution imminent somewhere, sometime, and then we use it. In the same manner, neither revolution nor a higher socio-economic order comes out of imperialism naturally here. It has to be hoped that something will happen and we will be good. So this is the different aspect and the merits and demerits and the absurdity of Prabhat Patnaik and Utsa Patnaik theory of imperialism. And the most important thing here note is, what is the purpose of this theory? The purpose of this theory is to make petty bourgeois progressive. So, to conclude the last two sessions of discussions, we have seen quite a lot of theorizing by Professor Prabhat Patnaik and his book on imperialism. And in all of these, something that shines through is his thorough reformist social democratic orientation and his complete revision of Marxism, complete detachment, complete divorce from Marxism. So we cannot and we should not consider Professor Prabhat Patnaik to be a Marxian intellectual at all. He's a completely social democratic, reformist intellectual. And his writings, because of this, have to be exposed in front of the working class. With this, I would like to conclude my discussion here. I'll be very happy to take questions if there are any. In the end, let me thank Vedika for giving me this opportunity here to discuss with you. Thank you very much. Comrade Suresh, back to you.
Yeah, thank you, Comrade Bipin. Anyway, let's keep this to the end. Now, take a 2-minute break. I have some announcement and then we can take questions. Friends and comrades, so we have listened to Comrade Bipin Balaram on second day. And today he dealt with Professor Prabhat Patnaik and Utsa Patnaik's work on theory of imperialism. So please send your questions. Those who are following the talk on Discord, you can text your questions in the questions information channel. And those comrades who are following the discussion on YouTube and Facebook, please post your questions in the respective comment box, our moderators will present the questions to Comrade Bipin. And a few announcements. Uh, there is a Vedika YouTube channel where this talk is streaming live now, and all the earlier talks are also available in the YouTube channel. The link to which is posted here in questions information channel now. You can subscribe to the channel, and you can find the earlier talks as well. There are many interesting talks on various important topics of fundamental Marxism, Leninism, and also on some contemporary issues. To update the members with the information on the talks and to share the resource material that the speakers are sharing. For example, Comrade Bipin was mentioning about his article on Prabhat Patnaik's theory of imperialism, which is there in the blog, and we will share the article in the questions information channel here as well as in the WhatsApp group. So please join the WhatsApp groups. Those who are not in WhatsApp groups yet can join the WhatsApp group so that you can receive the information about the talks and the resource material. The link for the WhatsApp group is also posted in this channel now. And there is an open forum where you can find uh, various discussions on the topics of contemporary relevance and the topics of fundamental Marxism. And we can use especially this open forum when the Vedika sessions are not in progress. So, Comrade Bipin, if you are ready, now we can take the questions.
Sure.
Yeah. So there is one question from Amulya. What is the Patnaik's class analysis of India? What is the class alliance for workers according to them?
I have not seen Patnaik talking about the Indian capitalism, the stage of Indian capitalism as such till now. But his idea on class alliance is the alliance of peasants and workers. And from in between, if you read in between the lines, then he is also for People's Democratic Revolution in India. But he doesn't clearly delineate these things anywhere. Towards the end of his book on imperial etc. But it is from the perspective of the book, because in the perspective of the book, the peasant is as revolutionary and as anti-imperialist a class as the working class. In fact, the peasants are more anti-imperialist than the working class. So it is from this perspective that he talks in the book. But apart from that, maybe I don't know whether he has dealt with this problem in his earlier works somewhere, but I have not seen him explicitly talking or analyzing about the stage of Indian capitalism or the nature of class alliance that we need here, etc.
Okay, comrade. There is a question from Linosin. He says this might be yesterday's, like this question pertains to yesterday's lecture, but please consider answering this. And his question is, how should a revolutionary left party address social democratic parties like CPI and CPM, which claim to be communist but follow reformist policies? How can revolutionaries expose the differences between genuine communist politics and social democracy? And what strategies should they use to engage with these parties and their supporters?
Thorough political exposure. That is the policy to be followed. Thorough political exposure, and this exposure, in fact, is not very difficult, because the workers and the common man and the toiling class, they understand that social democracy is class collaborationist and reformist. So, on a spontaneous level, on ground, they have an understanding about this. But the problem with this understanding, as we were talking about yesterday, is that with this understanding, with this disillusionment of the left, if no revolutionary dispensation is visible, there is every chance that the common man will be interested towards fascism, will be pulled towards fascism. So the most important thing is to make revolutionary alternatives visible to the common man, and visibility can only be dealt with by ground level work, ground level political political work geared towards class consciousness, raising the class consciousness. So that is what revolutionary politics have to do in India now. But the exposure of social democracy is not difficult at all, because they are already spontaneously exposed. You just have to give it a little bit of theoretical backing. That is all. Because everybody, even the die-hard supporters of CPIM, knows that there is nothing Marxist in CPIM. So that's a question that has already been answered on the ground and in the minds of the people. But we have to give theoretical backing to that. And we have to also show visibility for revolutionary alternatives. And that's not an easy task, but that is what has to be done.
Yeah, Kamili Taraka Ramarao is asking this question. Why did the majority of the Indian society not participate in the revolt?
I'm not sure which revolt is Comrade talking about. Is it about some concrete revolt, or is it just that why are they not revolting?
Maybe I'm not sure. So Kamili Taraka Ramarao garu, can you please elaborate your question? So if you can repost your question with the clarity that Comrade Bipin is asking for, then we will take your question. Yeah, so he agreed to repost the question, Comrade Bipin. So let us wait for it. And in the meanwhile, Comrade Lenin Babu.
If he reposts it, I'll be very interested in answering that question, because there are certain important points in that question.
So he agreed to repost the question. In the meanwhile, we take Avinash question. You said that China is an imperialist country. How to classify a country as imperialist, and how can CPM call China socialist? And what is the Patnaik's position on this?
CPM's position on China is very well known. They say that it is socialist. Really, socialism with Chinese characteristics. That is what they call China. And Patnaik is also with CPIM on this. Not just Patnaik, but almost all of the JNU political scientists see China as a progressive power, if not socialist, but at least as a progressive power. But the truth remains that China is a fast developing imperialist country with an autocratic neoliberal setup. How can we characterize an imperialist country? To characterize not just China, but even Russia or any other country as an imperialist country, we have to look at the characteristics of imperialism clearly demarcated by Lenin. We have to see the fact the statistics of concentration of capital, concentration of banking sector, and formation of finance capital, export of capital, etc., etc. Based on these statistics only, we will be able to arrive at a conclusion on whether a country is imperialist or not. When we are saying this, we should also put in a caveat here, because we should not deal with the statistics, these facts, in a very mechanical manner. We have to deal with the fact, these statistics, in a very politically sensitive and dialectical manner. Because as Lenin says in his book on imperialism, statistics can be made to say anything you want. You take statistics, statistical data in a very limited sense, then you can make the data say whatever you want, especially in time of machine learning, etc., big data analysis. You can make data say anything you want. So the data, the socio-political data, the political economic data regarding the facets of imperialism, which Lenin had underlined, have to be clearly studied in case of China and Russia. And many Marxist political economics have done this study, and they have come to the conclusion that China is a very fastly developing imperialist country. They are on the cusp of imperialism. It cannot be said that they are not imperialist. But many reformist political economists like Prabhat Patnaik and many others would like to see China still as non-imperialist country, but that is not true.
Okay, comrade. Ayush sent a question. How should we look at understanding of imperialism of CPI Maoist?
I'm sorry, but I'm not very aware of the idea of imperialism put forward by CPI Maoist. So it wouldn't be, correct on my part to answer that question with the limited idea that I have.
Okay, comrade. Sujan sends this question. I'm not aware if Prabhat Patnaik's theory of imperialism is officially accepted by his party. I haven't seen any public struggle against this either. Can we see this just as their opportunism or another symptom of social democracy?
It is a very important symptom of social democracy, comrade, because social democracy has many intellectuals with it, including Prabhat Patnaik, and they write many things. These never are discussed within the party or any forum in the party. And what is more, these theories or these writings that come out, they have no effect on social democratic practice on the ground. Social democratic practice on the ground is completely moored, the foundation is fully neoliberal. Nothing can change that. So these are like, some intellectual discussions happening in some forums among some elite intellectuals, which do not affect the practice of social democracy on the ground even 1 centimeter. Nothing is affected. Because of that, the politicians inside social democracy, may it be Pinarayi Vijayan or anybody, the real politicians inside the political group inside CPIM is not concerned about these things, because it doesn't affect the practice on the ground. Who is concerned about these things are a group of students, maybe in JNU, group of academia, who are troubled by the fact that troubled by the inconsistencies and contradictions of social democratic practice, and who wants some ideas to somehow prove to themselves that it is not as bad as they think that is. So Prabhat Patnaik's theory of imperialism, which says that petit bourgeois, progressive, etc., may help them. But on the ground, they have no effect. Because of that, CPIM as a party never, they don't support this theory. They don't disagree with the theory also. It's just that something has come out and they are not interested in it.
Okay. Lenin Babu has a question. I heard that Karl Marx prescribed for the abolition of wage system, but economists and the leaders of various mass organizations keep on demanding for increase in wages. Even Prabhat Patnaik in his articles prescribes or advocates raise in wages, but this is what he said. And then Lenin Babu is asking to elaborate on the abolition of wage system.
It is true, the basic aim of Marxism is the abolition of wage system, system of wages, and the abolition of wage slavery. But that doesn't mean that when capitalism is in place, we should not ask for increase in wages. See, we say that in capitalism, reform and revolution happens. It is not just that we are looking for only revolution without any reform. And it is also not true that we want only reform and not revolution. So, class struggle works in on two different levels, in day-to-day politics, in day-to-day economic struggles, in order to make the current position of the workers much better. We have to ask for more wages. We have to ask for increase in wages. We have to ask for increase in the betterment of working class, etc., etc. But if you stop there, if you ask only for betterment of wages, betterment of conditions, etc., it would become what Marx and Lenin called economism. Because you are only looking at economic betterment of the working class. You are not looking to release them from wage slavery. Releasing them from wage slavery will only happen when we go, as Lenin said here, to a higher socio-economic order. So this economic struggle is very important in a day-to-day case. But as I told you yesterday, as we discussed yesterday, it should be informed completely by what we call the actuality of revolution. So if you stop with only economic demands, then it is reformist. But each economic demand, if we see it as contributing to the betterment of the working class and contributing to the building of the class consciousness of the working class, towards pushing them towards a higher class consciousness, then it becomes real Marxist practice. So there is no contradiction between asking for wage increase and working for the abolition of wage slavery. These are complementary things. These are dialectically connected. But if you work only for one thing, then it becomes reformist.
Okay. Kamili Taraka Ramarao has a recent question. Though there are many communist groups in India, why couldn't they bring up revolutions as they have brought up in Russia and China? Why couldn't the Indian communism mobilize Indian society as communism has done in other countries?
Revolution cannot be made at will, comrade. Revolution is not something which we put a date and then we make it. That is not how it happens. Revolution and any revolutionary movement should have objective conditions, ripened objective conditions, which is basically what we discussed yesterday as general crisis. And general crisis can be brought about by many causes, can be brought about by a financial crisis or a political crisis or even war, an imperialist crisis, we do not know. And with that, we should have subjective conditions also. We should have a class conscious, militant, proletariat which is working or which is led by a vanguard party. For example, there has been revolutionary situations. There have been revolutionary potentialities. For example, look at what happened in Sri Lanka a year ago. There was a crisis and there was popular revolt against the government and against the system, but the system hijacked it. Why? Because there was no vanguard political dispensation to really take advantage of the crisis, to consummate the crisis. The same happened in Bangladesh also. There was huge popular revolt. Now also, the popular revolt is continuing in Bangladesh. We see Arab Spring. So wherever in India, look at what happened in during emergency. Emergency was the first real crisis of Indian democracy, welfare democracy. At that point of time, it was welfare democracy. But during none of these stages, in none of these countries, the subjective conditions were not there to take advantage of this. So when all these subjective and objective conditions come together, then only revolutions or socio-economic changes can be consummated. So the point here is that we have to build militant, class-based organizations to make sure that the subjective conditions are ready as and when a crisis reaches its zenith. That has not happened yet, unfortunately, because of many reasons. And one of the reasons is the predominance, the hegemony of social democracy. And that hegemony always pulls the working class back from any decisive step, taking any decisive step to the in a crisis situation. So, yeah, the coming together of all these situations has created such a condition, comrade.
Yeah, comrade. Chonash is asking this question. If Patnaiks are saying that there is no capitalism in Indian agriculture, then what is the Indian agriculture? Is it semi-feudal, pre-capitalist? Isn't petty production? Isn't petty production part of capitalism? So, am I clear, comrade, or you want me to read it again?
Please read it once again. Comrade.
Yeah. If Patnaiks are saying that there is no capitalism in Indian agriculture, then what is Indian agriculture? Is it semi-feudal or pre-capitalist? Isn't petty production part of capitalism?
Yeah, Prabhat Patnaik and Utsa Patnaik in their book says that Indian agriculture is based on petty production. Is petty production a part of capitalist agriculture? Of course it is. But the predominance in capitalist agriculture would be to capitalist relations. But petty production will always be present. It will not be absent, but it will always be present in some sectors, in some agricultural commodities, etc. In the same as manufacture. But the predominance will always be for capitalist relations. But as far as Prabhat and Utsa are concerned, all these commodities in Indian agriculture is produced by peasants or petty productions itself. So they don't use the word semi-feudal anywhere. They don't use the word feudal also. They just use the word petty production and peasant agriculture all throughout. So that is their idea of Indian agriculture. And regarding the merit of their idea, we have already seen.
Okay, there is a question from Patem Shiva. We think, like she's from Andhra Pradesh, comrade. So she says, we think Kerala people have certain level of consciousness because it's a communist government. That's why we always watch Malayali movies instead of Telugu movies. It's very shocking speech about CPM and Prabhat Patnaik. Worked with CPM Union, where it does only vote bank politics like all political parties. Is it true?
Uh, this idea about Kerala being intellectually superior is a myth. And it is totally wrong. Totally wrong. See, Kerala historically has had better living standards and better educational standards than probably the rest of the country. And because of this, it has a population that is with a little bit more civic sense than probably other parts of the country, in particular, maybe North India. But other than that, the intellectual superiority or the social superiority of Kerala is just a myth which is being propounded by none other than CPI. So this is even leading to regional chauvinism in Kerala, because many left in Kerala think that Kerala is superior to other parts of India like Bihar or Gujarat, etc. They have nothing but pity for places like Bihar, Gujarat, Uttar Pradesh, etc., which is against the basic idea of class solidarity. So here, instead of class solidarity, the left in Kerala is propounding regional solidarity between the people of Kerala, as if the people of Kerala have a progressive credential, irrespective of which class they belong to. They are supposed to be progressive. For example, the left front had a slogan for the previous parliamentary elections, which went like this: communalism will not be tolerated here because this is Kerala. The slogan was in Malayalam, but if you translate it roughly to English, it comes out like this: communism will not be tolerated here because this is Kerala. Now, this tells us that the left thinks that there is something in Kerala society which acts against communism, which is not true. I mean, every society is divided into classes, and every society will have certain classes which are for communism and certain classes which are not for communism. This is the ABC of Marxist class analysis. But apart from this, opposed to this, what the left in Kerala says is that class divisions are not the most important thing. Regionalistic divisions are the important thing. And regionalistically, Kerala has progressive credentials. This is directly leading to regional chauvinism inside Kerala. And it is also having a very bad effect on class consciousness in Kerala, because instead of class consciousness, instead of class divides, the left is coming up with regional divides, which is a very, very dangerous thing to do inside decaying capitalism. So it is a myth, comrade. It's not true at all. It's a myth propounded by the left for their own, for their own use.
Okay. There is a question from Linosin. How should revolutionary leftists define a socialist state? And how can we distinguish between socialist and imperialist countries, such as the debate over China? If a successful revolution occurs in India, how can we ensure that the new state follows a socialist path rather than replicating existing state structure? What concrete steps should be taken to build and sustain socialism after a revolution?
The scope of these questions are very high.
Yeah,
So
there are many
I don't.
questions in it.
There are many
If you
questions,
take
and
a couple of them, as you see.
many of these questions, the scope is so high that
Yeah,
you need a different talk for that. but I'll answer one or two of them. Interesting things. One is, how do you know whether a state is socialist or capitalist, or a state is imperialist or capitalist? Now, many left liberals and left intellectuals, especially in the left, in social democratic left, claim that China is a socialist country. And the reason that they give for that is that in China, everything is owned by the state. So because everything is owned by the state, because there is state control over all the production, all the activities, it is socialist or it is communist. This is a completely wrong idea of socialism. In the same logic, then Saudi Arabia is also socialist, because almost everything is controlled and owned by the monarchy there in Saudi Arabia. And many of the monarchist states in Middle East are socialists. So this is a childish understanding of socialism that many on the social democratic left has. The real question of socialism and capitalism is not whether the state owns this or that thing, but who controls the state, or in whose hands is the state in. Is it in the hands of the proletariat, or is it in the hands of the bourgeoisie? Very simple. And if this is the real Marxist question to ask, and if this question is asked, then it can be clearly seen that China, the state of China, is completely in the hands of the Chinese bourgeoisie. That is a question to ask. So there are arguments upon arguments on social media sites, etc., telling us, these left intellectuals telling us how big a socialist state China is, because everything is owned by the state. This is a very childish understanding of the class character of the state and socialism versus capitalism.
Okay, comrade. There is a rather lengthy comment from E. Jayarajan in YouTube. I'm reading it out. I also posted it in the questions and information text channel. You can see it, comrade, for your reference.
Okay.
Now I'm reading it out. The last message in the questions information text channel is the comment I'm reading out now. I disagree with Bipin Balaram's arguments against Prabhat Patnaik. His analysis reveals a fundamental misunderstanding of global capitalism, particularly its evolution after the 1990s. While capital export existed after the 1870s, facilitated by the gold following the emergence of the forex market in the 1990s, represents a qualitatively different phenomenon. Finance capital has since become increasingly detached from its country of origin. The Patnaiks argue that imperialism persists, countering claims that globalization has eliminated it and ushered in a pluralistic world, but Patnaiks try to make a way ahead, and it is derided by Bipin. So, if you want to respond, you can respond on it.
Yeah, I think his comment is on the same line as Patnaik's comment. And I have shown the problems with that in my presentation itself. And nobody is against taking theory forward, taking Marxism forward. For example, nobody, let alone Marxist, will say that Lenin's theory of imperialism is the last word on imperialism. No, not at all. Lenin's book on imperialism is, in his own words, a popular outline of the theory, and every effort to refine it, to make it more rigorous, to bring it forward, etc., is most welcome. But the problem with Patnaik and Patnaik's theories is not that he's trying to make it forward, bring it forward, or he's trying to make advances with it, but the direction in which he is making advances. The direction in which he is making advances is the direction of petty bourgeois social democracy, which revises even the basis, not just of Leninism, of Marxism itself, as I have showed in my discussion today. So the problem of the direction, the class nature of the direction is what makes me deride Prabhat Patnaik. And I think that derision is needed.
Yeah, there is another comment on YouTube. This is from A.B. Button. The conclusion is a misrepresentation of their argument. It's more that all capitalisms require external primary commodity reserves to. There is a typo here. He wrote to MAR their own inflation. I couldn't make sense of it. I'm reading it again. It's more that all capitalisms require external primary commodity reserves to mar their own inflation. It doesn't mean that if a country is in the tropical zone, it cannot be imperialist. Patnaik appears to be more critical of China than CPIM party line. Patnaik appears to believe China has abandoned the goals of full employment, which is a necessity for socialism. So this is comment, comrade.
I too did not understand his first, argument.
Yeah. So if A.B. Button, if you are following this, you can retype it and send it in the YouTube comments box. We can take it again. Can I take the next question, comrade?
Sure.
Yeah, this is Vagishan Harati on YouTube. How should we understand the behavior of China in the contemporary imperialist order? So there are few more questions. If you think it is relevant, you can take it up.
Okay, about China, I think I have already, answered one or two questions. It says that China is an upcoming imperialist country and it is part of the China-Russia axis itself, which is coming up to be a rival imperialist axis, which has already come up to be a rival imperialist axis to the US-NATO axis. And these two axes are locked in a direct warfare in Ukraine. That is our understanding of the Chinese situation right now.
Okay, comrade. This question is from Ramesh Sharma Adhikari on YouTube. Nowadays, digital capital is occupying a significant portion of global wealth. How do we specify the class struggle in this sector in the process of evolution?
Comrade, that has nothing to do with this talk, I think. That is a general question, which I guess will take another talk to answer. So probably I will pass it for another time, probably.
Yes, comrade. There is a question from RK. Could you briefly elaborate on the characteristics or outcomes of imperialism alongside war? My question here is, while it is clearly evident from your great analysis and critique that Professor Patnaik's redefinition of imperialism and all his theories are ludicrous, is there still a chance that there is a change in the imperialist nature and behavior that deviates from war-centric policies to new modes of imperialism due to the changed times from First World War, Lenin era to the current internationalization, globalization of finance capital? For example, how do we understand the relate finance capital? How do we understand and relate finance capital market monopoly to inter-imperialist axis of NATO and Russia, China in the context of Ukraine war, and likewise Zionist imperialism against Palestine? Yeah, it's a rather lengthy one. You can see it in the text channel if you want, comrade.
Yes, comrade. I am seeing it. It is true, comrade, that there has been many changes in the modus operandi of imperialism. It cannot be otherwise because we are talking about 100 years of imperialism now. Because Lenin's book on imperialism came out in 1914, 1915. It has been more than 100 years, 110 years now. And these 110 years, we have passed through different stages of capitalism. We have even passed through a post-World War II welfare boom stage of capitalism. So it's very natural that there will be many changes in the modus operandi of capitalism. So nobody denies that. But the most important thing is the structure of imperialist theory the same as that proposed by Lenin? The important thing here for me is the structure remains the same. As with Marx's theory of capitalism itself, there is a particular critique of Marxism which says that Marx only had industrial capitalism in mind. Now we have service capitalism, and service capitalism is not as industrial capitalism. This is all not true. This is all stupid things, because, of course, peripherally, apparently, there is a difference between industrial capitalism and what they call service capitalism. But fundamentally, there is no difference at all. And foundations is what Marx theorized. So, in the same way, in imperialism also, in the theory of imperialism also, there are lots of changes. There are, for example, let us take war. There is a very little chance that an Ukraine-type war will set up a world war because of nuclear deterrence. There is this problem of nuclear deterrence now because Russia has nuclear weapon and NATO, of course, has nuclear weapon, and nobody wants it to escalate into a world war now. So probably the probability of this coalescing into a world war has decreased, like World War I or World War II, it has decreased. But that doesn't mean that inter-imperialist rivalries have evaporated. That doesn't also mean that the wars that we have now has nothing to do with imperialism. The way in which wars will be fought, the level at which the wars will be fought will be obviously different, because in one sense, due to this nuclear option also. Like this, many changes would have happened to the mode of operation and the phenomenal consequences of imperialism. All those things have to be studied rigorously. But the framework for the study of imperialism remains that put forward by Lenin. And that is the important thing. Here, the problem with Prabhat Patnaik is not that he is refining or taking the framework forward. He is completely dismantling the framework and putting another ludicrous one on top of it. That is our issue as Marxists here.
Yeah. AP Button said he will rephrase and resend the question on YouTube. In the meanwhile,
Sure.
RK has another question. How do we see the change in imperialist landscape and axis with the election of Trump?
Election of
Hello?
Trump. Yes. Election of Trump. Structurally, it does nothing to the imperialist landscape. The problem with America, the problem with USA is that its hegemony is decreasing day by day. And probably they need a joker on top to somehow pull a rabbit out of the hat. So it does not have direct implication on the structure of imperialism. It may have some local implications on the way in which the US imperialism pans out. For example, his comments on Palestine last week, etc. But that is not directly connected to the structure of imperialism. But locally, in the actions of US imperialism, definitely it will have an effect.
Okay, AB Patton has sent it again. I'm reading it out.
Okay, comrade. Okay,
I meant the argument of the Patnaiks is that dominant capitalisms, which also accommodate for wage increases, require external primary commodity reserves so as to manage accelerating inflation. This contradiction is externalized onto primary commodity producers by depressing the prices of primary goods. Thus, I don't see how this necessarily means that tropical countries cannot be imperialist. It is another thing that the way global divisions of labor has developed, most tropical countries are dominated.
Patnaik's theory, as written in his book, logically should mean that tropical capitalism cannot be imperialist, comrade. No amount of bombastic words can really take you out of that very simple logic. The very simple logic is that by Patnaik's theory, a tropical country which does not need to impose inflation on any other country, how can it be imperialist at all? It cannot be and it need not be imperialist, because imperialism, as far as Prabhat Patnaik and Utsa Patnaik is concerned, is a policy of income deflation which is necessitated by geographical asymmetry. With respect to a tropical country, there is no geographical asymmetry. And because of that, there is no need for income deflation at all. It is very simple logic, extremely simple common sense logic.
Okay, comrade. I think that's all. We have taken all the questions.
Okay, comrade. Okay.
But Shiva expressed her big thanks for sharing your insights and enlightening our minds. And she added that she enjoyed your crisp English language. And Ravi expressed his thanks to you. And we too thank you, Comrade Bipin. Friends, Bipin lives in Poland now. He's working in Poland, and there are extreme weather changes, and he's suffering from fever. But still, he took out time and he put his energies together to give this 2-day brilliant talk. So I thank Bipin on behalf of all the listeners today and yesterday. And Comrade Bipin, before we close the session, can you please place your concluding remarks for these 2 days talk?
Sure, comrade. Sure, comrade. First, let me place on record my thanks to Vedika. I am very impressed by the way in which these talks are being held, the very disciplined way in which these discussions are being conducted. I am very impressed. And I think left circles all over India has to try and follow it. And the discussions that followed from these talks were also very constructive. I was, yesterday as well as today, I was really, even surprised by the number of questions that came up and the level of questions that came up. It means that we have, Vedika has been able to get listeners who are very interested in Marxist affairs and social affairs, which is very heartening for me. So I thoroughly enjoyed giving these talks, and I learned many important things from the questions and discussions that we had. Even though, as I told at the beginning of this talk, it is rather boring and not fulfilling to read Professor Patnaik and to talk about him. Still, in a negative way, I think some ideas on Marxism and some ideas on Leninism have come to the fore during these talks, and that I think is a takeaway from these things. I thank again Vedika and all the listeners for hearing me out. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Comrade Bipin. And there are a few more expressions of appreciation and thanks from Comrade Vijay Kumar Muttavarapu, RK, and Khan Ayush on YouTube. There is a request to you to come to Vedika often and share your thoughts on many more topics. And we too share that wish that you will come here often.
Sure, comrade, sure.
Yeah, comrade. So, dear friends and comrades, this is the today talk from Comrade Bipin on Professor Prabhat Patnaik's why how does why Professor Prabhat Patnaik wants us to forget Lenin. So today on day 2, he started with outlining Lenin's theory of imperialism. He pointed out 3 specific features: concentration of capital, which leads to monopolization, which leads to export of capital into the backward countries. Uh, then he went on exposing Professor Patnaik's theories and how they revised not only Lenin on the theory of imperialism, but the very fundamental premise of Marxism, stating that Marx could see only one structural aspect of capital, the labor capital contradiction, and they could not see the second structural aspect, that of imperialism, and how Patnaik have reduced imperialism from a historic development as a stage of capitalism to something that is related to geography and something related to the policies of certain imperialist countries. And after thoroughly exposing various other premises of Patnaik, like geographical asymmetry, and imperialism as being a structural entity right from the beginning of capitalism without having anything to do with the monopoly stage of capitalism, and certain uh, loopholes or lacunae in their book on imperialism, such as lack of clear-cut definition on important terms. Uh, Finally, uh, Comrade Bipin outlines or places before us the reason, the purpose for which Patnaik have done this endeavor. It is because of their class position. They fundamentally represent the petty bourgeois class position, both in theory and also in the politics, and thus their intellectual endeavor justify the petty bourgeois politics of reformist social democratic left parties, especially CPM. And that is precisely why we have to thoroughly expose the intellectual endeavors of Professor Patnaik, which revises Lenin on the theory of imperialism and many other fundamental theories, and also the very crux of Marxism. And while answering the questions, he added some more brilliant points. So he again reiterated the importance of thoroughly exposing uh, the petty bourgeois nature and the revisionist and reformist nature of Prabhat Patnaik. And he added some more important points, such as the objective situation and the subjective readiness of the vanguard for a revolution to be consummated, and also the importance of taking up economic demands, but not to confine to economism. So the purpose of every economic demand should be to betterment of the lives of working class, at the same time raising the political consciousness of the working class. And he also very frankly put out, or he demystified the intellectual superiority of the Kerala populace. Uh, so these are some of the important aspects of Comrade Bipin's talk today. So with this, let us conclude the session for today. మిత్రులారా, తదుపరి వేదిక టాక్ ఫిబ్రవరి 22-23 తేదీలలో ఉంటుంది. We'll have our next Vedika session on February 22nd and 23rd. And I thank Comrade Bipin and all the participants once again. Good night, comrades.